that you're now one of us and not just, coming to see the show.
Yeah, yeah, because I could actually do something if I can meet the criteria, but that's what we'll learn tonight. So,
Yep, exactly. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Just a little brief history here. The Guild started in 1985 or something like that. Actually, one of the founding members just passed away the other day. She was a client of mine, and her daughter called me and told me that she'd passed. So I hate that. But we started doing shows in, I think it was 93, with the show being the main fundraiser for the Guild. Up till that time, we had a lot of little bitty things going on. We'd sell something here or there. And we decided that having the show would be our main fundraiser. And that money is used for funding our education program. So that's why we can have, lectures and workshops and things like that. By the way, if y'all have questions or comments in here at any point in time, please just hop in. This is definitely not a presentation from me. I want to hear from you guys. And all of you that have already been to a lot of shows, jump in too. We hold it every other year. We obviously missed 21. So it's been 4 years since we had a show, sadly. And we hold it at the Watkinsville or Oconee County Civic Center. If you know Oconee County at all and where the high school is, Oconee High School is, the Civic Center is just right in front of the high school. It's a nice venue. We fill it up. We really could stand to go someplace bigger, but if we go someplace bigger, it's going to just so much change the character of the show that we've always just decided to stay where we are and make it work. So the show itself is on March 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think the times are like 10 to 6 on Friday and Saturday, and then 12 to 4 on Sunday. The Thursday is our setup day. It's a crazy day because when you walk into the Civic Center, there's nothing on the floor, and by 4 o'clock, all the frames are up and all the quilts are hung, and it's amazing. It's fun place to be. The vendors are setting up during that time as well. The boutique is in the rotunda area of the Civic Center, and so it's all set up there. The ribbons are put on. Once we get everything hung, everybody is shooed out of the area except for those that are working on stuff, and they put the ribbons on the quilts. At 5:30, we move across the rotunda to the auditorium, and there we have our award ceremony. So you get to hear, who has won the different awards that the judge has awarded. And then we normally have some door prizes that some of our vendors supply, and then we can go in and actually have our preview party, which is viewing the show and shopping. I'm normally too exhausted to shop, but the vendors will normally give you 10% off. Most of them will that night if you shop that night. So that's something fun to look forward to. On Friday and Saturday, the thing that, the show is hung. We have visitors coming in, our different people coming in to see the show. The tickets are $7 each. And we normally hang around 200 quilts. So we're kind of anxious to see what it's going to be this year since our membership is down a little bit, but we've had a lot longer to make quilts. So I'm hoping that maybe we'll have at least 200, and I'd love to have, 250. It'd be great to have not enough room for all the quilts. During those 2 days of the show, we need people working through those days. If you're available, if you have a job that you have to take off time for, if you can take off, that Friday, if you're available, but take off the Thursday first. That's really what we need is the Thursday. And people work to sell tickets. Some people are working in the boutique selling items. You can be a white glove lady, which is just basically anybody that's standing, out on the floor itself. And the idea is that if someone wants to look at the back of a quilt or has questions, they can ask that person that's wandering around. We need people that help with the vendors. So if the vendors can go eat their lunch, sometimes one of our members will sit in a vendor booth for 20 minutes and let those vendors go and eat. And then just helping in the kitchen, etc. Now, the kitchen is a magnificent place, and this is one of the things that the vendors love about our show is because we provide food for all the days of the show, and it's Linda Murray's in charge of the kitchen, and she'll be putting out some sheets asking people to sign up for things, but we try to keep it with soups and chilies and sandwiches and things like that are easy. But it's a lot of fun just to go sit back in the back and take a little break and enjoy some food and some fellowship back there.
Now, is that for just the vendors and the people working, or is that for people that are coming to see the show?
No, it's just for vendors and workers.
Okay.
Yeah. We've talked about, somebody has said we need to do a food cart or something like that, and that's fine, except in March, there's just not any place to sit out, inside and eat except in that kitchen area. We try to keep all the food and drink in the kitchen area for obvious reasons. So yeah, that's just for vendors. That's one of the reasons we hate the thought of moving like to the Classic Center in Athens, is we wouldn't be able to bring in our own food. We'd have to cater through them. It's like, oh, we got to have our food. Our vendors have to have their food. After the show is over, when we close the doors on the Sunday afternoon, we start the takedown process. It's always interesting because it takes 6+ hours to put the show up and about an hour and a half to take it down. It comes down really fast. I think we're highly motivated. We take the quilts down, and Pat Schroeder is in charge of that, and who's over there undoing quilting. And we're working to get a good system together to be able to get the quilts down easily and safely and into their own holders and off to the right person. Okay. Normally about an hour after the show closes, the quilts will be ready and people can start coming in and picking up their quilts. And we ask you to pick them up that night before the show, after the show's over. And if you can't be there for some reason, you can have somebody else pick your quilts up. We just need to have that information. So let's start. Questions up till now.
Well, I noticed in the schedule that the judging is done prior to hanging the show. So how does that work?
Well, the judge comes in, and we
Can you hear me?
have a church that we meet at, and we take all the quilts there, and she judges them on tables. They're laid out on tables. They're not hung at that point in time. So all the judging is done the week before the show.
So I have another question related to that. A lot of the quilts that I've made are quilted either by hand or by machine, but I have covered up the back with other fabric because my stitching wasn't necessarily something I wanted to show off. Mm-hmm. And so I wondered if they would be disqualified from judging because of that.
Pretty much. I think that I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure that we made the comment that you can't have false backs on them for them to be allowed. Let's check that and see. Karen,
You can't even show them?
Say again?
I couldn't even exhibit them?
Yeah, you could definitely exhibit them. Yeah, we can definitely exhibit them. That's one of your options, is whether or not that quilt is going to be good when you're figuring it.
Dr. we answer questions, Dr. So he was off to another event.
Y'all keep talking.
Drugs.
Francis, I thought something in the notes said that all the quilts were being judged this time. Is that not right?
That's what we decided originally.
Yeah, actually, you're right. We have decided that, Pat. We'll need to talk about that and see. We had taken out the for exhibition only criteria or a category, but if there are several, but mainly because nobody's, very seldom does anybody ever put anything in that. But we'll have a look at that and see. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon and Pat, for reminding me.
Yeah, Francis,
Question about
Francis, we may have to wait to see. A lot of that may have to be determined kind of as we get a feeling for how many quilts people are, if we end up with close to 200 of people who want to be judged, then we're going to not have room to do exhibition, except 1 or 2. But back to Karen's question, always in the past, and I doubt it's changed, you can't have false backs on it. Even if you've done something and frame it, you have to have wanted to coat the back, of your frame. You had to have that off so that the judge could see the back of the quilt. But Madeline or Sylvia will probably have the final no on that.
And let's just talk. Somebody else was asking. Cheryl, were you asking a question?
I have a question about the boutique.
Yeah.
Now, you said that's in the rotunda. If
Mhm.
we're bringing stuff, so we don't have to sit by our table and sell stuff, or?
No. Your stuff will be will be turned in before the show. And there's information, there's a form for filling out just to give them all the information about what you're selling, how much you're selling it for. Sharon, I believe Sharon Rockhold is in one of them in charge of that. I think they have to put a tag on it, say with a certain system of numbering and that sort of thing.
Yes, and we'll be getting that out.
Okay.
See, it also gets turned in January, right?
Normally it's turned in with receiving.
Keeping.
Yeah, is that January?
It's February. It's
February.
February 9th and 11th.
Okay, so yeah, we'll soon be turning out the information for putting your tags on, and we do like if people put stuff in to take a turn, take one of the slots at least at
Okay.
volunteering at the table, but yeah, we'll have more of that as we go. I'm glad to hear somebody's making something. That's great. But I do wonder.
Once you turn it in, you don't have to do anything else. They will market it for you. There are certain people that can get people to buy anything, super sorry. You just put her on the table and she'll sell everything there.
Yeah, I was going to say, those, the two that I'm looking at them, the two I made a couple of years ago are on canvas, which means that the back really doesn't show, but that's the way they were made. So, I mean, I don't know. That's part of the question about showing the back. There's no way to take it off. I can maybe
we'll have to do some
we can talk
checking
about
on
our
that.
picture and see. Yeah. One of them you could see the back, I think, through, but the other one is not.
Mhm.
Anyway, you can go on. We can talk about that later.
That's fine.
I have a question.
Yes, Sharon.
Can you put a quilt in the show that's been in another show?
Yes,
I
as
don't
long
have
as it hadn't been in
any-
our show, it's fine.
Yeah, because I don't really have anything I've made since I've been here.
Mhm.
I have things I've made in Virginia and they were in the show there. We didn't do judging. I'm having some problem with the judging part of this
Mhm.
show. And I hope they have a display only or exhibit only category.
Okay.
But the only thing that I would have has already been shown in the show up in Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
But that would be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. As long as it hasn't been in our show. And in all honesty, there were 2 years that we had the same quilt in both shows. We figured it out after the fact when we were looking at the pictures and went, oh crap, how did we do that one? Yeah, that's not a problem at all. Let me talk about judging for just a second. And I know that I've had a lot of quilts judged, and in most cases I knew what the judge was going to say before I looked at the forms, because I knew what was right with the quilt and I knew what was wrong with the quilt. But Sharon, I encourage you to have them judged for this reason, and I'm going to put this in the newsletter in the next couple of months. There was a woman did a little diagram, and it was a flow chart, and it says judges' comments. Do I agree? No. Then you go on about your business. Judges' comments. Do I agree? Yes. Then you think, is it something that is important enough for me to change next time? Then you change it. If it's not, then no, and you go on about your business. And I think that's the thing that is important here, is that, I had a quilt that was an optical illusion quilt, and the judge hated it. She's like, no, there's no place for the eye to rest. There was, I felt like, on the outsides, but I had to say, well, that was kind of what I was going for. And then I had a quilt that I did that I was so excited about for our show, and the judge hated it. And she made some comments about contrast in it. And when I read the comments, I was frustrated, but then I thought, yeah, I actually remember having that thought when I was putting it together. So 2 weeks later, I went upstairs and pulled out some paint, and I made a lot more contrast in that quilt. And it actually hung at Houston in the tactile architecture division, hung it in several different shows at a traveling exhibition. So I think sometimes we can, if we can take those comments with a little bit of a grain of salt and say, well, maybe I can do this to improve it. But boy, was I mad when she didn't like it to begin with.
Yeah, and I think our judges usually say something that they like about it, and then something we can improve.
Mhm.
So it's not like a checklist with everything wrong, which if it was all technical, mine would get
Yeah.
bad, bad. But since they tell you something good,
Mhm.
you know, like I really like your choice of colors, or, there's something that they will do good. I've always survived being judged, so just
Mhm.
putting it out there.
And you're also quite subject to what the idiosyncrasies of the judges. But I guess I've scribed for 2 or 3 judgings, and we've had 1 or 2 that straight lines must be straight. If we wrote that down once, we wrote it down 200 times. She would just, well, that was her bugaboo. That nothing could not be straight. So.
Yeah. And, judges are supposed to take their personal preferences out of it. But there's no way you can do that. I've judged a couple of fairs, and you can't, you're just drawn to those things that you really, really like. So
I guess I'm thinking I quilt because I enjoy quilting and it's for my pleasure.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to take that away from me.
yeah.
And I'm very, yeah. That's my biggest bugaboo about this whole show is the judging.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling us that. I mean, I do understand that we all have different views of it. And like I said, I've been mad at judges and I've loved judges. Okay. Entering your quilts, we're going to have 2 different forms of entry. We'll have an online and then a paper entry. We're encouraging everybody that can to do the online form because it just makes life so much easier for everybody. I think last show we had maybe 6 or 7 people that chose to do paper entries, but most people did online. So that'll be showing up sometime the first part of December. As I said in the meeting the other day, the final day for entries is the January meeting, which I think is the 10th. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. That'll be the final day for the entries to be turned in. There is a $5 entry fee, and that just helps us pay for all the bits and pieces that we need to get those quilts hung, including this year buying some new hanging rods and other things like that, new equipment.
And it's $5 per quilt.
Per
entered,
quilt, yes.
not $5, and you can enter as
Oh.
many as you want.
Thank you. And when you look at the category sheet that I sent to you, you can enter 3 quilts in any one category with a maximum of 8 quilts overall. So each guild member could enter 8 quilts. We asked you when you do your entry to tell us which one is the first quilt you want entered, the second quilt, the third, to rank them so that if we end up with way too many quilts, which is what we hope, we are going to start knocking them off, starting with your number 8 one and going back the other direction. So we want everybody will have at least 1 quilt in there. Probably everybody can have 2 or 3 quilts in there since if we have 80, 85 members. But that's how we handle that. And we'll give you more information about that as we go. And if we have to start taking your quilts out, we're going to let you know. You're not going to just get to the show and find out, oh, well, this quilt didn't get in. Now you'll know beforehand what has happened with that. When you are entering the quilts, you have to give us a picture of your quilt. And this does not have to be a professional photo by any means, but we encourage you, if you can find a place to hang it flat or to lay it out flat, to give us as good a picture as possible, because these pictures are what the girls are going to use that are laying out the show. And so they're going to be looking for colors that fit together and that sort of thing to make our show as cohesive as possible. So you'll be putting a photograph in.
And we do have that design wall up in the fiber room at Linden House. If you need a place, the only trouble is you have to move all the crap that's been piled in front of it. But it is a double wide. I think it's double wide design wall.
There's a big design wall up on the second floor in the fiber room, and you can go in there and do your quilts. I actually photographed my husband and I photographed all my quilts there one day, and it really is a nice area for doing that. Okay, what else? I kind of feel like I've skipped around so much. I'm not sure what I'm missing here. Again, we talked about judging and how that's going to be done. And then our hanging committee goes through and takes the information from the layout, whoever has done our layout, and uses that to decide, to get everything prepared for us to do the hanging. And that's always an interesting process to get all of the quilts up.
Francis,
Yes, ma'am.
to emphasize, I think we need to emphasize, because this affects lots of people. When you're doing your entry form, be as accurate as you can on the width versus the length of your quilt, because receiving is going to be rather firm about this. And layout has to know, if your quilt is 10 by 10, it's one thing, but if you've got a 20 by 40 inch quilt and you say it's 40 by 20, it really throws things off, and layout starts doing a lot of pre-planning before we receive them, and we're receiving them only a couple of weeks before judging. And so there's a little less time between when we receive and when the show gets hung. So be really accurate. Try not to be a couple of inches off.
Yeah.
Much less wrong ways around, upside, what width versus length.
Right. And when we get to receiving, we'll give you a lot more information about this, but every quilt will need a 4-inch sleeve on the back at the top, and it will need to be put into a pillowcase or other fabric envelope. And then there's some information that you'll put on that pillowcase before you bring it. And also every quilt will need a label on the back of some sort. It can just be, something that you've handwritten. It can be as fancy or whatever you want to do with it, but it needs to have a label on it. And then that label will need to be covered up with a piece of fabric so that when we're judging, there's no name showing up anywhere. But again, I've done a video before, but I think I'll do a new one this year and just show you how to do all of that and how to get everything packaged up and ready for receiving.
Francis, is that a permanent label or something that can then later be removed? For example, if it's going to turn into a QOV or something.
Oh yeah. You could definitely just put a label on there. Don't tell anybody this, but there have been times that I have just pinned my label on, because then I pinned another piece of fabric over the top so you couldn't see that the label underneath was just pinned. So,
okay. Yeah. Or just like a loose whip stitch or something. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Just something, and that's for us to identify the quilt, just to make sure that we know whose quilt is whose, but we do need it covered up for judging and for receiving.
All right.
Other questions?
Does your quilt need to have a title?
We will ask for a title when we're doing the registration, when you're filling out the registration form. If you want to call it untitled, that's fine. You can call it Sharon's quilt number 423, whatever works for you. But it's normally just something that I normally call my husband and say, do you have a fun title for this quilt? That's how I get mine. Good question.
I don't know if you're getting to this, if I'm jumping ahead or whatever, but I definitely have a question about, because as we talked about, I've never, I've seen the show, but I've never participated in the show. Mm-hmm. I make quilt tops, but I don't have the ability to quilt it. Mm-hmm. So there's all this mention in the notes about professional quilters or paid something. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of go over that? Because if I can make a top, but I don't know how I'm going to get it quilted.
Sure. This is a huge controversy in quilt show world right now, because what do you do with the quilts that have not been quilted by the person that made the top? What we have chosen to do is to follow some of the other larger shows, and we have split all of those into a category called quilting service. Last year, we ended up with 3 different categories, I believe. I only have 2 listed here, but I think we had to add a third category last year, and we just did them by size. So there's, quilting service large, quilting service medium, quilting service small. And so any quilt that has been quilted by a third party for payment, that is going to be part of the quilting service category.
Is that term for payment important? If
Well,
if my friend will quilt it for me because she's got the machine.
yeah, no, it's not important. It's just that it's a third party
Yeah.
quilted it that wasn't involved in the actual designing of the quilt. So if Sheila Shepherd and I get together and we both work together on designing the top and have a plan for it, and then I do all the piecing and she does all the quilting, that's more of a two-person quilt than it is me paying her or giving her my quilt and asking her to quilt it for me. Does that make sense?
And that's a whole different category, isn't it?
Yeah, two-person quilts would be a different category.
All right. So if I make a top and I take it over to Sherry and she quilts it for me,
Mhm.
Whether it's free or $2 or
Right.
$100,
Yeah.
that falls into that service category.
Yeah, quilting service. Yeah. And
Okay.
which category you're in will just be determined by what size it is.
All right. What if, okay.
What if?
What if it's a challenge? And what if it's my challenge quilt? And I still had to have somebody else quilt it for me.
That's a good question.
Shame.
I would, you know what, we'll have to talk about that. I'm going to kick that one to my committee, to the core committee.
That I
Because
don't think has
either
come up
way-
before, but
I don't
Either
think
way,
so, either.
whatever it is, whatever I make, it's not going to be quilted by me.
Sure.
So does everybody have machines over there? Has everybody got long arms?
oh, no,
Okay. Okay. So
That's why I'm picking this out, because I'm doing it on a domestic.
Yeah, I think there are a number of people that do their own domestic quilting. And honestly, there's a couple classes that I've taught on how to do it. So we might do that if there's enough interest in it at some point. But you know, going to the quilting service is more and more popular, certainly, because most people like the piecing better than they do the quilting.
mhm. Okay. Well, if you could find out about the challenge quilt too,
Yes.
but I mean, whatever it is, I'll just turn in whatever I have and want to turn in, I guess, and
Yeah, yeah.
it'll go in the
We'll
right
look
place.
forward to seeing them.
Well, looking forward to making them. So I've got my plan.
Yeah, remember, you don't have to have the quilt finished when you do the registration form, but it has to be finished when you bring it to receiving.
Okay.
We've actually had, well, actually, one night I sat in my car and put the last few stitches in the binding before I took it in. So,
Well, the last show we had, one of our members was still putting the binding on and the hanging sleeve until about 5 minutes after we closed receiving
Yeah.
officially. We finally got her to give it. We're not going to do that this year.
yeah.
No.
All right.
What else?
Well, and I just like to say that there were years that I didn't even get to go to the show because of my kids being in Allstate. Anyway,
Mhm.
the receiving is a neat time to help out too, because all the quilts come in, we unroll all of them, take a picture, measure, and they go on. So it's a good time to see the quilts if you're not going to make it to the quilt
Oh, that's a good
place.
point.
So, it really is kind of a cool thing to see them. It's like, oh, I don't remember that quilt. Oh, I don't remember that quilt from show and tell. So anyway, just throwing that out there too.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
For those new people, Super Sorry that she was talking about that could sell anything is now on there saying iPhone 3. So if she's the good sell person down there. She's on the bottom of my screen. I don't know where she is on yours.
But we told them that you're our marketing guru for the boutique.
Oh. And the food goes all day long. So we all take in food. You can run back for a break anytime or get something to eat, something to drink. So we all take food and we all eat the food the whole time. It's really kind of fun.
And
It does take a lot of people, and we are a lot smaller guild, so it kind of means that we all need to get our husbands, get our whoever to come help set up. And
yeah, that's the other thing that I'm going to really be asking is if you have husbands or kids or other people that can help us on the Thursday and the Sunday. muscle is good because basically we're all getting older. And so climbing up and down ladders isn't as easy as it was 25 years ago. And so, any help that we can have like that. I'm also going to need somebody to be able to drive a U-Haul truck, somebody that feels comfortable with doing that. We've had a husband, actually Sue's husband did it for a couple of years, but I think he wants us to have somebody else doing it. So we're going to be looking for those sorts of help as well.
And it's a great way to get to know the people in the guild. The retreat's one, which I haven't been to in a long time, but the show, you kind of end up walking the floor with people and, talk more than you normally get to talk. So it's nice.
Well, Kanta is a new member, the one whose husband is a professor in textiles at UGA. She's the Indian lady that I've been bringing.
Mm-hmm.
She is willing to help and her husband is willing to help.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's younger. She's only 43.
Only young chick.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, her husband's willing. I spoke with him also about it and he's very willing.
Very good. Yeah, we'll have some sign-up sheets in January and February just to get some idea of how many people we have. And I guess if we have to, we'll hire somebody to help us, but I hope we don't have to do that. We'll just get there and see. Wanted to go back to the boutique information. Sharon, y'all had said anything handmade that it doesn't have to be quilting related this year. Is that what y'all are doing?
Yes. We just want to make some money for the charity bee and the guild. So, like if you make pottery or I don't know what else would qualify, but other things that you like to do. I mean, we can't have like humongous stuff in that, probably in the atrium, but whatever we can get out
What
there.
kinds of things sell? Well,
Things that are, I think, well, Suze probably knows better, but we've been set like below $40, probably even below 25 are probably the most. Smaller things have gone.
Remember,
Not so
Sherry,
many holiday.
remember Sherry brought in those rabbits that year? They were only about 6 inches tall or something. And so she brought them in and they went zoom. The first day she went home and made some more. And every one of them were sold.
wow.
Also, if you have a quilt that you want to sell, you can enter it in the show and mark it for sale. And if it sells, then you get 85% of the price and the guild gets 15% of it. So it doesn't just have to be things that are put in the boutique. It can be bigger quilts if you have something that you want to sell.
Francis, I chimed in a little late and I didn't hear. Suppose somebody wants to exhibit a quilt and not have it judged. Are we doing that?
Well, we have discussed the core committee had discussed not doing that because most people that category was very, very seldom ever used. But several people tonight have commented on that. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's still here on the category notes. Pat, I think maybe we decided to leave it in.
My notes say we decided to take it out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I saw
But I could have
somewhere,
misheard,
Yeah.
No, I saw
I'm just
that
asking
somewhere.
in case
'Cause
anybody asked that question and I didn't hear it. I chimed in late. All of a sudden I realized this was happening.
Well, space would be the determining factor, wouldn't it?
Yeah, space is the final
That's the
determining
ultimate.
factor with it. But we were discussing earlier, one person has quilts with false backs and we were concerned about those. So there's just some things that we need to clarify with the core committee and we will get those done. It's so funny. You think you got all the bases covered and then somebody asks a question, you go, oh man, I don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that.
Well, and as you get more unusual things,
Mhm.
I think it might happen more often, and then you decide if you really want some of the more different things, or if we stick with a more
Yeah.
traditional quilt. I'm talking.
One year, a girl entered a quilt that was probably 12 feet wide. So we had to figure out how we're going to hang this thing, but we did.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the fun challenges to have, how you're going to hang things. Other questions?
Well, I'm just happy we're having one.
Oh, amen. I really had thought we could do it in 21, but then when we just started thinking about the fact that we weren't even having meetings regularly, it just wasn't going to happen. We had to have more things going on. So
Yeah, nobody was vaccinated yet at that time.
yeah, people were starting to, but yeah. So anyway, that's where we are. Any other, what else do y'all have questions or comments?
Is that Pam Pontenberg down there?
It is.
Do you have anything to add?
Her microphone is not working.
Oh, I was gonna say, does she have anything to add? She's done a lot.
Pam is doing our graphics for the show. So she's the one going to be printing up the cards and everything that are going to go on the quilts with names and information and that sort of thing. So Pam, I have a box for you that's been in my car for about 3 months. I'll get it to you eventually.
Yeah, I think people really liked hearing the stories that were, I can't remember if they were on the cards or if some people just sort of knew and talked to people or anyway, but I know there were some that people really
Yeah,
liked
last
the
year we
stories.
had the stories. Well, okay, background here. For many years we did a booklet that had all the information about every quilt in it. And we realized that, you know, a lot of them were just, people were carrying them around and then giving them back to us at the end of the show, or, you know, we're taking them home and throwing them away or whatever. So we decided, and it was a lot of money and a lot of effort to put that together. So in 19, I think it was, we decided to forego the programs. And so last year we had information typed up on pages that were hung in each of the bays that told about information about those quilts that were in that bay. I think we're going to try this time to actually have it on cards attached to each quilt. So we'll see how that goes. You just try something new, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, you say, well, we'll change that next year. We'll eventually get everything exactly right.
No.
Then we'll
Well,
all
no,
be
first
too
my
old and
bubble.
won't want to do it.
That needs
Well,
to,
then we don't have to improve anything and it's no fun, you know?
That's true. That's
It's
true.
like, there's always something.
For many years, we had taken tons of trucks and cars and everything to the place where the frames were stored, and we'd load them all up and everybody, you know, bring them over to the Civic Center. And one year we were missing a couple barrels of our boxes of sheets for hanging, and I made an announcement. Somebody said, "Oh, that's in the back of my car." So yeah, that was it was so hard to deal with that when you're trying to make everything work well. And then we had a core committee meeting, and one woman said, "Have you ever thought about renting a U-Haul for a couple hours?" And I went, "Oh, I guess we could do that, couldn't we?" So it's a whole lot easier this way. What else? How many of you have quilts you're putting in?
I do.
Maybe.
Everybody? Cool. More than one?
Yes.
Oh, I know. I was going to talk about novice. If you are new to quilting, Cheryl, I don't know how, if you're new to quilting or if you've been doing it for a while, but we do have a novice category that can be your first quilt that you've entered in the Cotton Patch Show as a novice quilter. So that's something to think about as well. We have a lot of people that are like, well, my quilts aren't good enough to hang in there because I haven't been doing it very long. Well, we have the category for you. So yes, they are good enough.
Is novice just first couple of years with Cotton Patch? I thought it was you had to be within like your first 3 years of quilting.
Yeah, first 3 years of their quilting career. And it has to be your first Cotton Patch Show to enter.
Yeah.
So
But you can't have quilted for 20 years and just come to Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. That when I was judging for the Georgia National Fair, we had a couple of quilts that were a novice that we were like, okay, this person is not a novice. I'm sorry, they're just not. So you know, you can tell. What else?
People, you know, the novice category, that was the first time I ever did a show. I'd been quilting for about a year, and I really I really appreciated all the comments that, again, getting judged, the judge made. I knew what the problem, you know, but she gave some very constructive, well, really not, well, criticism, but basically things to look at, to look ahead. And that was very helpful for going forward.
Yeah.
You know, if you've only been quilting for 1 or 2 years, you're probably not going to be Houston show qualified.
No, no. I still haven't put one in and I'm thinking about it this year.
Cool.
I'm
You put
thinking
that
about,
one behind you in. I like that one.
well, that's done too, but I was thinking about the 2-inch blocks.
Yeah. Definitely. We'd love to have those, all of those in. It's a lot of fun, y'all. The show is just, it's just fun to be around for the days and just seeing the quilts and listening to the people coming through ooh and ah over how great a show it is and you know, and listening. It's fun to stand by one of your quilts and listen to what people say about it. Of course, you kind of have to have a thick skin because sometimes I go, oh, I wouldn't have done that.
It could be bad.
Last one, I walked around and around because that's what y'all told me to do. And every time I went around, I saw something different. But I also would tell somebody, you know, like, hey, you know, notice this one, or, you know, people talking, you know, they'll ask you questions. And yeah, it's just really a neat thing. People
It's a
are
lot of
always
fun.
very excited to be there too.
Mhm.
And I bet they will be after all the pandemic, that they'll be very excited to be
Mhm.
back.
Yeah,
I
we
hope
think so. You know, it's a busy time for the quilting and sewing arts because you've got QuiltCon, Modern Quilt Guild is in Atlanta the weekend before, and then us, and then the following weekend is the Sewing Expo. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for people to see quilts and other things. So, all right, any other questions?
No, I'll just say again, I'm very happy that it's going to happen.
Yes, we all are.
Agree.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight. And if you think of something else, you know, holler at me and ask any questions. And I will check on these few things that I've said. I don't know the answer to that. And we'll see if we can figure it out for you.
Thanks to all you worker bees.
All right.
Thank you.